Welcome back to the coffee table series. This time we're going to put the joinery on these and make up those end assemblies. That sounds good? Stick around. Hi, welcome back to the Woodgrafter. I'm Andy Guile and our mission here is to inspire, educate and support you in your journey to becoming a better woodworker. We do that through a whole series of videos, video series such as this one where we take you step by step to building something, tool tips, tool reviews, tool techniques. Every now and then we deep dive in a subjective area and really just hang out and have a good chat about all things woodworking. So if you're not a subscriber, consider subscribing now, leave me a thumbs up, hit that notification bell and leave a comment and get in touch. Always keen to see what you think. With that said, let's crack on. Now the next thing I need to do is to mark out for the dominoes, and also I want to allow for a 2mm shadow line. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to take my panel and I'm going to lie it face down on the bench with my reference edge at the top, and then I'm going to take the first leg and lie that down next to it like that. Then take my next leg and lie down that next to it. So my squiggles are facing inwards, that's where my joint is going to go. And I want to make sure that I line this top up on these two legs. So everything's nice and flush at the top and that's lined up in the way it's going to go. So obviously this is the inside of my legs, so this piece here is going to go in the centre like that. I now want to put a light bit of clamping pressure across this joint, making sure that those tops are still flush. Now I can turn it over and obviously the clamping pressure is here, so you can see these legs are just springing out a little bit. So now I'll bring another clamp across that just to bring them back into square. Now I'm not overly concerned whether this is flush with these pieces or not, but I am concerned that this top is level, because what I now want to do is to mark up for the dominoes. Now we know that this overall is 150 wide, so I'm going to put two dominoes, one in here and one in here. So I'm going to come in, I think 40 for this top domino, which is going to be there, and 40 for this top domino, that's going to be there, and 110 from the top for this domino, which will be there, and 110 from this top for this domino, which will be there. And I find it just easier to do it this way, with that clamping pressure holding this into position for me, and that just allows me to line these dominoes up perfectly. If you're trying to balance this on wood or trying to hold it, there's no guarantee, in fact there's every guarantee that these two lines here won't be perfectly accurate, and if they're not, this top will not end up flush. So with that done, we can cut the dominoes in this piece with some confidence. I'm also just going to mark this up, so I know that this is leg C, so I'm going to call UC and UC. I'm going to call this leg D, and that's going to be D. And that's just so I know that those two pieces are going to go in this way. So I know where my letters are at the top, and I've got that line, so I've got the right orientation, and I know that this is my outside face. So can I just drop this clamp off for a second and just turn this carefully over, try not to disturb it, and I can now drop this one and just give this a bit of clamping pressure in the same way. Now I want this to come down mid-point, so I want to mark first of all 75mm from the top of the leg, because this, don't forget, is 150mm. So I'm going to mark 75mm here, just give myself a centre point just there, and similarly coming down from the top a centre point here. Now this piece of material is 77 wide, so 38.5 is actually in the middle. So what we'll do is we'll take 38.5 there, and we'll call you centre, and then we'll just line our square up to catch that exact same distance, which is about there, and then we will use this as a centre point there and there, and now I can line those centre points up there on this piece of material. Bit of like clamping pressure, just hold that into place and line those centre marks up. So that's the position of this one, 75 down, centred around that 38.5 mark. And once again, I can now mark my 2 dominoes up on the outside of this. So there you go, I now got this back piece marked as well. So the front piece is marked, the back piece is marked, I know where my dominoes are going to go, so I mark the other assembly up and we can get these dominoes cut. Now obviously at this point I want to keep these together because these are now a set. I just want to weigh up the dominoes I want to use on this. The thickness of this wood is coming about 21 millimeters. It's a good practice to use your dominoes to be a third of the material, which would come in around about 7 or exactly 7 millimeters. Dominoes come in 8 millimeters or 6 millimeters. So it's the width here that I think is going to be important. If I come in with the 8 millimeters and line those up in that center, then that actually looks pretty good. And also if I use the 6 millimeters, also pretty good. I think these are the same, yeah, these are the same length. So I think for strength I'm going to come in with 8 millimeter dominoes. So we'll use the 8 millimeters for this job. Obviously make sure you're going into the right side, so these are our top lines. We put the squiggle on here so we know that this is the business end, so mortise is here, mortise is here. This piece of material I want to be flush with the top, so whatever we cut onto this edge here, we're going to cut onto this edge as well. So I want that to be perfectly flush on the top. This edge here, I want this one to be sat down by 2 millimeters because I want a deliberate shadow line here. So we'll do the easy one first of all, which is going to be this edge here. So I've dropped the 8 millimeter bit into the domino and I've set the stop to 22 millimeters and I'm setting a depth of cut of 20, oops, no I'm not, of 20 millimeters. And with that done, everything here should line up perfectly for this cut. And we'll give that a bit of a test run. There we go. That was pretty good. So that's what I was looking for. Everything is now nicely lined up. Everything is nice and flush and smooth, and that's brilliant. Really, really brilliant. And that in theory should also be square. And look at that. Absolutely bang on. So that side done, we can now come in and do this side. Looking really good. So the next job is to cut these dominoes for the outside panels. Now remember, these are slightly different. They're not going to be flush with the front, they're going to be offset by a few millimeters. Currently thinking about 2, but I'll weigh that up in a second. Now this stock is obviously a lot thinner than this stock. And although we were aiming for 18 millimeters on this stock, in reality it's come down to just under 18 millimeters. So I'm going to use a smaller domino. This is a 6 millimeter by 40 millimeter domino. So obviously I need to change the cutter inside this for the 6 millimeter and change the distance down the center to about halfway. So I'll roughly set this up for about a 16 millimeter cut on this domino, and then we'll cut all these end pieces. So the dominoes cut on the end panels, I now want to cut the corresponding dominoes on these legs. If I come in with a domino on the same setting, i.e. 16 millimeters, that's going to put my domino 8 millimeters down from the end, and this panel will be flush. So I'm going to offset it a little bit, just deliberately put a gap in it like that. So I want to offset this by about 2 millimeters. Now on a 16 millimeter setting, this will drill this hole 8 millimeters down from the outside surface, half of what's on this little gauge here. So if I set that gauge to 20 millimeters, it's going to drill down from this space 10 millimeters, half of the 20. So by setting this to 20mm, that's going to take this hole down here by 10mm, and that will give me an offset of 2mm on the end panel. And it's as easy as that. So let's get these drilled. And what we should end up with is 2 sets of legs. With all these holes nicely cut in like this, you should have your inner piece cut and your outer panel piece cut on both ends, and we're ready to do the glue up. So that's what we'll do. Let's get the glue up done. So I'm ready for the glue up. Usual setup, got my paper down, got my clamps ready to go sized, got my glue box with Type Bond 3 inside it, got my brush and got my lolly stick. Now on this particular job, I only want to put clamping pressure on across those joints. I don't want to clamp down here because that will kick the legs out and take it out of square. So this clamp is purely to give me a support so these don't tip. And it's these 2 clamps here that's going to be giving me the clamping pressure. So I'm going to drop my dominoes into here, I'll put glue inside this, and then I'll put these 2 pieces into position. Then I'll put glue inside here, put the dominoes in, glue inside this, and then bring a final assembly together. And this clamp here will come on the top to give me opposing clamping pressure in the middle. Therefore it should all look pretty damn fine. Let's get that job done. And there you go, and that's what we are looking for. So there you go, 2 end panels glued up, ready to go. So we're going to let this glue go off probably overnight, make sure it's nice and firm and nice and set. And while that's doing that, we're going to turn our attention to the internal frame that holds these 2 end assemblies together. We'll look at that in the next episode. I'll see you soon.